Welcome to Martechify, a community of marketing professionals interested in digital marketing, Martech, and AI. I'm your host today, Ekaterina Konovalova, and I'm so excited to welcome to this conversation Joel Polanco, who is a senior hardware product manager in the data center and AI computing group at Intel. Joel, welcome.
Thank you, Ekaterina, for having me. I appreciate your time.
Joel, we have so much to unpack today, and we'll talk about AI disruption and how Intel is investing billions of dollars into growing its business. But first, as always, let's talk about your career journey and what inspired you to join Intel, where you spent over 20 years of your career.
Yes, thank you for that. I finished my undergrad and graduate at Arizona State University here in Phoenix, Arizona. And when I finished, I had completed like 3 internships, right? And one of them was at Intel in Chandler, and I had the opportunity to be a part of one of the manufacturing organizations. And that internship showed me a lot about tech, manufacturing. And at the time, I ended up selecting Intel for an interesting reason, which was I wanted to work in manufacturing, which at the time was not seen as something as desirable as, say, as software or some other area. But I wanted the opportunity to be in manufacturing because I thought it might be going away. Like, basically over time, manufacturing has gone down in the U.S. and has gone overseas. What's amazing here, shift 20 years later, is the manufacturing's coming back, and so is Intel. And so this has just been one of the most exciting points in my career, and I'm really looking forward to what the future has in store now.
Well, let's talk about semiconductor industry because you had such a good overview on your LinkedIn. Share what's happening at Intel and on a global scale.
Sure. So going back to the LinkedIn post, a lot of people ask me about this because it actually I didn't expect it to go as far and as wide as it did. But essentially, it was me trying to voice some facts, frustration, and trying to tell the story because there was so much misinformation out in the news and in the media, and I just wanted folks to know, here's what's going on from my perspective. I've been here 20 years in various roles, all the way from manufacturing to sales, marketing, and product. I've seen all parts of the business, and we had been going through a downturn. Essentially, we were transitioning away from being a pure play integrated device manufacturer. So in the semiconductor world, an integrated device manufacturer is an IDM, is known as an IDM. This is someone who designs and builds chips for themselves. And we were shifting from that to being a foundry. And in a foundry model, you're actually building or manufacturing chips for other companies. So in the case of many of our partners, sometimes competitors, companies like AMD or NVIDIA or Apple, they're designing their own chips, but then they're having them manufactured at a company called TSMC based in Taiwan. They're the largest foundry, and actually Intel is a big customer of them as well. And so in either case, going back to the tweet or to the post, people didn't understand how complicated it is to transition from designing chips and making them for yourself to actually doing that for other customers. It's a cultural shift. It's a business process shift. It's a massive capital investment. A fab nowadays costs upwards of $10 billion to get up and running. And so my post was really about the challenges the company was having, the importance of bringing manufacturing back to the United States, because so much of the manufacturing had gone overseas, and we had seen massive disruptions during COVID to supply chains. And what was really highlighted was there are these choke points, and there could be severe shortages and limitations if too much manufacturing or supply chain was centralized in just one company or in one geographical area. And so I talked about this, and not too far after, Intel started to turn around, and it started to turn around because we have a new CEO who is very well connected, and he met with the U.S. government. He's met with other partners, told this story, explained it, and and essentially took the strategy from our prior CEO and amplified that and got it really focused. And essentially, what I'm seeing here at work now is it's just a what I like to describe the best of both worlds. The best of
Right.
both worlds now is your company. I'm in a large company, but at the same time, in many areas, it's starting to behave like a startup. So you have the sense of urgency, but you also have the resources, and I call this the best of both worlds. And for folks that are out there job seeking, I definitely encourage you to check out the intel.com/job site if you are looking for something, because I definitely encourage you to consider semiconductor and or manufacturing, because there is definitely a bright future ahead.
Oh, yes, for sure. And indeed, there's so many people who are looking for a job with AI disruption. So it's very encouraging to hear that Intel is growing and there are a lot of opportunities. We will talk about AI later, but first,
Hmm.
let's finish the story about the industry. And
Hmm.
it sounds like your new CEO anticipated the demand and began investing billions of dollars in building your capabilities. So, can you share more about what has been done and how it's playing out right now?
Yeah. So what has happened over the last few years? We all may recall, 2022, 2023, the Fed raised interest rates, inflation was going wild, and suddenly there was this big downturn. But what happened at that time was OpenAI released ChatGPT, which unlocked just this whole new paradigm of AI that we're all starting to use now, generative AI, where you can query these LLMs or models and then you get back these answers. And it's almost, at first, it's almost magical. Nowadays, it's starting to become like normal, but at the time, it was magical. And what that resulted in is just this explosive demand and need for more and more chips, networking equipment, memory. Memory has gone crazy. And so there's just this massive need for computing right now. And we're starting to see a number of new devices getting built, as well as the data center. The main thing is the data center build out, which is happening. There is a huge demand for that, and it's resulted in a new industrial wave, essentially needing more power, more energy, more data center buildings and facilities, and compute to fill them for this insatiable demand that people have to go and use these tools for new for to be able to do things that they weren't able to do in the past. And I can give you some examples of that, but essentially, what's happening now is there is a big demand for chips, and our prior CEO, our current one, are in the middle of this of these groups of folks that are driving this new shift, and they're able to see out on where things are headed. But the reality is we're constrained. We're constrained because we actually cannot make enough chips for all the demand that is out there right now, and that's been our big challenge at the moment.
And how do you solve it? Is it still a lot of buying overseas or investing heavily in domestic technologies?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. A lot of companies are having to book their orders quarters or even years in advance. And then the other piece on our side is building more capacity. So we're in the middle of deciding the next set of factories that need to be built. And on one hand, it's a tough problem to solve because what's historically happened in the semiconductor industry, especially in the memory side, is you see these waves of demand that show up. You attempt to build your factories to supply that demand, and then the demand starts to fall out for whatever reason. The economy starts to dip, and so what you end up doing is building those new facilities, and then they sit empty. And so there's always this risk management that you need to do where you build the factories, but you don't want to overbuild because then you get saddled with lots of capital and debt that sits on the books for many years. This time, uh, it it's just a bit unprecedented because the amount of demand is just significantly higher than the industry has ever seen. It is truly unprecedented.
Yes, and what is a typical cycle when you mentioned building a factory and there's a spike in demand and then you meet the demand and then factories sit empty? Is it even possible to estimate the cycle in this wild, wild west of AI explosion? What it might look like this time?
This time, the I don't want to say, I don't want to use the famous last words, but this time is different. That's always your famous last words. I will say though that there hasn't been any significant technology shifts that have resulted in, say, a dramatic dip in the need for processing or for memory. So for instance, like there hasn't been a software optimization that has compressed the memory need down to 1/10 of its current scope. There hasn't been a signal that says companies don't want to use this technology to use AI for building applications and writing code. There aren't those sorts of signals yet. What we could run into at some point, though, is because the demand is so high and the supply is constrained, the pricing or the economics start to get out of line, and it gets more and more expensive to use these tools. And until the supply catches up with the demand and drives the cost down, we may see some slowing in the adoption, but I don't see any sort of signal that says this is going away anytime soon, like 2000 crash or something like that.
Right. And how far do you think we are from the sci-fi holographic images? So, for example, now
Mm,
Google and HP, for example, partner on technology where the conferencing software has several cameras and it creates an illusion that the person you're talking to is next to you. It's very voluptuous and you can see them.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and it's almost the sci-fi movies from the 90s, and the next step is the projection in 3D. We're not even talking about VR sets, but
mhm.
more up in the air where you see the rendering of a person and it's in the volume. So have you seen or do you have any insight into how soon it might become our reality?
Yeah, got it. So I would say, if you were to ask Elon Musk, it's probably like next year.
Yeah.
Um, Joel's take on this. There's the thing I like to introduce here is Amara's law. Amara's law basically says, we're going to overhype things in the short term, but then we're going to underhype them in the long term. And I think that case is going to apply here with AI and then the AR and VR technologies like you're highlighting, which is the demos and the things that we're seeing today are real. They're just not scalable, and so it's going to take some time to be able to manufacture them or deliver them at a cost that is palatable for the average company, and then for those companies or people to see the ROI. And the case I'd bring here is like humanoid robots. That has been the talk of, like, the big discussion at the moment. And there's a lot of promise. You see some of the videos out of China where the robots are like doing the Olympics. They're having a marathon races and things, and you're like, wow, that's very advanced. Um, if you bring it back to like a technology that we are seeing that's in many cities, like I live in Phoenix. Here in Phoenix, Waymo is fully scaled to all the streets. Autonomous driving has been around for 20 years, and it still hasn't scaled out completely. And so I would say, let's assume humanoid robots in about 20 years from now. That would be my prediction. And when I say that, I mean like scaled out where they're on volumes, right? They're significantly out there, not just in your like billionaire's house type of thing.
Right. Yes. And going back, it exactly builds on the point you made earlier about the cost and scalability. So let's talk about your job, your
Mm,
most recent position, and your new position. Before you were working on point of sale products, and now you're shifted to a new role. So can you cover both?
absolutely. So I just started a new role in the data center and AI group at Intel. So I'm really excited for that. I'm a hardware product manager. It was prior to that, I had shifted from the edge group. So people sometimes don't realize this, but Intel processors go into a lot of things that are not a server and are not like a laptop or a desktop computer. And that's what the Edge group focuses on. They focus on what's historically called the embedded computing area. And these are all things like you were saying, point of sale. Could be in the gaming and casino gaming industry and slot machines. This is kiosks, health and patient monitoring in industrial robotic arms that go into factories. Basically, all these kind of harsh environments, and these devices, and sometimes are revenue collecting devices like a point of sale. And so in the Edge group, my responsibility was for the point of sale and self checkout area, and there, my responsibility was really to be an advocate for Intel in those markets, in the retail market. And point of sale is arguably the heart of a retail operation, and it's vital and important that it's always up and running. And that was my focus. And what we had been working on was a lot of self checkout and loss prevention type of use cases, which is the next wave of the retail transformation where you go into a store, and it's almost like retailers would like to have a frictionless environment with a great customer experience where you still interact with a retail associate, but it's not in a transactional way. It's more in a way where transactions are automated, and if you have a question you can reach out to the associate, but you don't the associate isn't always there having to scan everything. And so that requires lots of cameras, lots of sensors, lots of computing, and me and my team were working on various use cases around that.
So, for example, Old Navy has screens in the changing rooms, as well as
Mm.
obviously point of sale device. Would that be an example of?
That would be under another area called like digital signage. So
Mhm.
in those areas, there was some of the same technologies being used, cameras and sensing, to help you do product selection and product assortments and present you with new ideas. And so some of the same technologies apply, but that we would kind of classify that as more of the digital signage area. Another big area for retail that's growing is autonomous vending. For instance, there is some point of sale integrated. These are where you can have a store dropped in the middle of a city, and it has cooling, it has air conditioning, it has an automated door. In some cases, would have a robot inside that selects goods for you. And so that could be another example where point of sale is integrated, but this is a fully autonomous kind of store that gets dropped in any locality.
Interesting. San Francisco is obviously one of the leaders worldwide, and they have,
Hmm.
for example, a robotic manicure or
Mm,
chef making a salad. So it's a robot and it's kind of a mini store, mini restaurant without a human inside. So
hmm.
would that be an example?
That would be an example of where robotics and retail kind of meet exactly. And then at the end, obviously, you have some sort of payment transaction to complete the service. And point of sale would be integrated into that. That's right.
Interesting. And now let's switch to your new role. What will you
Hmm.
be working on?
So here, my new role will be in the in the Xeon product line for Intel. This is our CPUs, or central processing units, that are the heart of servers. They're often called, in nowadays terms, the term is the host node, but essentially it is turning into the orchestrator of agentic AI. So this is where the CPU is now organizing and orchestrating the tasks that the server is going to run. And you're starting to see this in various tools like Claude and Perplexity, that you have an interesting idea. Maybe Katerina wants to build a SaaS application that can define the best leads to generate, and then send those to her customers. And so you want to build this application, you can go into a tool like today, like Claude or Perplexity, literally type in a prompt box. This is what I want you to build. Please build me the demo. Here's some of the characteristics and the features. And those tools will literally go off and build that for you and build a demo. And when they go off and do that, they're spinning up these agents. They're essentially spinning up other computers. Those computers all have both CPUs and GPUs. So the CPU is kind of doing the orchestrating, the GPU is doing the intelligence and the thinking and the token generation, and they work in harmony to then build you, Ekaterina, your application that you want to go scale.
Yes, very interesting. And you touched a little bit on agentic AI
Hmm.
and provided a brief example about how it could be used, but can we look at other uses? Because it sounds like the industry is shifting and everybody is deploying their own agents, and it
Hmm.
could be so different. It could be, for example, in the telecom industry, we just released an article about when bots argue, when it's the company bot and the customer bot, and they call AT&T or other telecom companies, and the customer no longer is present. They're deploying their own agent that
Hmm.
chats, that argues, that negotiates, then it switches to a voice mode. And eventually, the
Hmm.
case study that caused one of these large telecom companies to reconsider their policies and figure out how to deal with this AI economy, the customer's bot imitated human voice, spoke with the
Hmm.
real manager at the telecom company, and negotiated a very favorable credit because they don't get tired, right? So the
That's
machines.
right.
And that was a concern when customers can deploy robots and AI agents and not just virtually typing on the computer, they can also speak. Another example was in fraud, where the actors, basically the scammers, people who are trying to either scam, do phishing messages, etc., from other countries, they no longer need perfect English or whatever language they're using in the country. They
Mm.
can use AI to deploy it for fraudulent activities. And
Hmm.
then obviously there are helpful uses such as, well, a busy mom has too much mental load, uses AI to optimize and plan her household and chores.
Hmm.
So, can we talk about your product and what you'll be working on and how
Sure.
it is unfolding in the industry and how people's behavior is changing because of AI agents?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're hitting on a few that I haven't heard, which is very interesting, and I would love to chat more about those. Um, they all hit on kind of what I was getting at, which is essentially when ChatGPT started, we humans are prompting the AI through a prompt box, through the chat box, and the interface is very basic. It's just a little box. You ask it questions, or you tell it things, and then it will do things. And that was the human kind of computer interaction. Now what's happening and what you're hitting on is the computer to computer interaction. And that's where generative AI then transforms into agentic. And what's happening kind of at a high level, and you're highlighting some of the cases is why this is happening is the internet traffic has now switched from being a majority of humans to being a majority of bots or computers. So most of the internet traffic now and moving forward is actually going to be agents or computers talking to computers because these companies have made it so easy to build these agents, which are essentially software programs that are defined by you to do some sort of task or achieve some sort of goal. So in the case of the first one that I love, which is this customer service example, is someone's created their agent to be able to speak to AT&T, which is not always the most pleasant experience, and really, I mean, honestly, not the best use of our time. And what's happened is the historically companies have created their automated systems, and now we, the customers, are able to create our own automated systems to talk to their automated systems. What's happening? Kind of two things. One is, if you think about it, that agent, if you break it down into physics, you're sending electrons back and forth. Those electrons need to be created somehow. That requires energy. That requires chips and memory and all these materials. And so you have to keep in mind, and I bring this, actually, this is a discussion on LinkedIn that I've just brought up, is the one of the key things that corporations need to be looking at now is unmanaged intelligence. Essentially, this is where these programs keep running, these agents keep running, that is going to drive up your costs. Like, that's not free. Right now it feels free because everything's just kind of being given away, and costs are being subsidized. But eventually it's not going to be free, and you're going to have to pay for that. And so, um, it'll be interesting to see coming over the next few years how the pricing starts to shift, and maybe it's not economical for you to create the agent to speak to the AT&T, because you're going to be burning your tokens, or spending money on credits to be able to do that. Um, that being said, there's this other big transition that's happening, which is cloud to edge agents, or they call it hybrid AI. And this is where costs could actually come down, where you, Ekaterina, create your agent on your laptop using an open source model. So this is a free model. Your agent is able to speak with AT&T through your computer, and you're not actually burning your token credits on the cloud. You're actually running it from your own computer. That capability hasn't scaled yet, but it's coming. And so that could drive down the cost of you being able to do these things. And so, what is going to shift? I think we're just going to see an explosion of software, since it's essentially software is going to be so inexpensive to create, and there's going to be many companies that make it so easy for you to create software that we're going to see lots of new companies, lots of new jobs uh, for these companies, but these companies are probably going to be a lot smaller, and we're going to have more tailored and personalized tools being created. Like, you might actually have given someone an idea to create an agent to speak specifically to telecom company customer service, because or cable companies, and you can hire their agent to talk on your behalf, with their agent to argue over your bill, and maybe they'll be running it on a laptop, and maybe it will be extremely low cost, and you'll be able to do that. I don't know. Really, there is going to be some big changes coming. I see a lot of opportunity. Obviously, there's with any technology, technology is not good nor bad. It's neutral. It's really in the intent of the individual who leverages it and creates it, that determines how that technology gets used. And so, in general, I believe people are good. Most people, the vast majority of people are good. So the good is going to outweigh the bad.
Yes, it's like a knife metaphor. You can cook delicious meal with it, or you can kill someone, right? So same with technology, it's a tool. Let's talk about vibe coding
Hmm.
and your take on as we're seeing this shift in consumers' behavior. I spoke with Joseph Yoon last year. He's one of the visionaries and he oversees AI at the University of Pittsburgh. And he mentioned that even plumbers soon will have 3D printers. So even though it's a
Mhm.
blue collar job, you're an HVAC professional, you're a plumber, electrician, these jobs are still being held by people mostly, but
Mhm.
the twist to their job would be plumbers can vibe code. They will have a computer, they'll mention, I'm missing this part, I need this kind of pipe, and they'll have a 3D printer and it will print them the part that they need for a repair. And it's
Mhm.
done through voice command, through computer software, and through physical piece of equipment, in this case, a 3D printer. So it's a
Mhm.
combination, that unique hybrid of traditional manual work with the technology. So
Mhm.
you touched on AI agents where we still are talking about software. What
Mhm.
about this kind of mixed use of
Yes,
tech?
yeah. So I think first off, the example with the plumbers and the electricians is great. Those are fantastic places to work at right now, especially with this huge explosion in construction that we have. And so one thing I would say to start with, just starting with the software is one of the big challenges that those individuals have is they typically have a small business and they can't answer the phone 24/7. So, like, initially, those plumbers and electricians that own their small business, like, can hire an agent to answer the phone 24/7 and respond to every call, something that they couldn't necessarily do in the past. And so I would say, um, before even going to the 3D metal printing, hire an agent to do your customer service and your reception. And I you can generate way more revenue here in the short term. That capability is available today, and I don't necessarily believe that the many of the electricians and the plumbers are going to vibe code those agents themselves. I think they'll work with a local consultant, or even one of these frontier model companies or SaaS company is going to be creating these tools, and the cost is just going to come down, and people will adopt those for your typical monthly subscription fee. Really, the metric there to look at is well, what would it cost me to, say, hire a virtual assistant
Hmm.
in a low cost geography versus what's the cost of doing, hiring a computer agent, and that's kind of going to be the decision on that. Moving into your example, yeah, I have no doubt that um, there's going to be these corner cases where folks are dealing with some old fittings, old connections, what have you, just this old infrastructure. They're going to need this part. It's not available, or it's not available in Pittsburgh in the city, and they're, rather than waiting for distribution to ship it in a week, they'll be able to hire a local service to do the 3D printing for them. And they'll just need to be able to simply port schematics from one, Google, wherever it's searched, into the tool 3D printer. It's made in a day or less, and then they can go and pick it up within their locality. I have no doubt that your friend is spot on. Now, when does this show up at scale? That's a question. I do know, for instance, in this is interesting, in the dental space, they're able to
Hmm.
print teeth now. And so and so there, it's not beyond us that they'll be able to print other things as well. Like, these things are just, they're already here, and it's a matter of when the costs come down to have them in say more locations.
Exactly. It sounds like the common theme of our conversation is It's available, or the vision is here. When can we scale it? And it may take a few decades for the mass production for it to be cost efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And your example about how plumbers can hire AI agents to answer their phone calls, the downside of it, at least right now. So let's kind of think about the vision in the future.
Mm.
There are some examples again in that bot arguing article that we just published from an HVAC company.
Mm-hmm.
There are some services that are getting leads and they pipe those leads to the actual HVAC companies to
Sure.
follow up. And all of them use AI agents. And sometimes there is a hallucination and AI agent did not capture all data, or they have incomplete information. So they had a specific example how a customer is waiting for a technician to come to their house, and the lead company and the actual HVAC company had completely different information about the time and availability of the technician. So they
Mm.
eventually lost that deal because of that either incomplete information in the system, how maybe processing wasn't fully complete and they used half of a data set or hallucinated. So we're still dealing with it a lot. But my
Mm-hmm.
question for you is, when do you think it will improve? Because I no longer see ChatGPT images with 6 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting better. I
Mm-hmm.
still see AI dances where people are morphing into animals and have several limbs. So it's still happening as we're recording this summer of 2026. When do you think AI agent communication will be more reliable?
Yeah, I think here, this is kind of going back to my latest post on LinkedIn, which is I propose a framework for tech, folks in tech to think about. So in tech, historically, we're focused on like these tech metrics, which are important to us, but they're not necessarily important to our they're not super important to our customers. So right now, if you were to go to many of the benchmarking sites, they're benchmarking the AI on intelligence, cost, and speed, which are like common sense, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. The problem with that is like you're giving an example of, well, the intelligence isn't like 100% yet, and maybe it'll never be 100%, but let's say it gets to 99.9. Okay, great, but there's still going to be some hallucinations in there. And so with that, you're kind of getting into this aspect of probabilistic versus deterministic software. Probabilistic being the AI that we use today. Most of the time, the answers come back fantastic and great, but there are some errors, and if you don't set up your prompt well, there could be completely fictitious information being brought to you, and if you're not careful, like obviously you can make some big mistakes and costly mistakes versus deterministic software, which is like, hey, this is the process, this is how it runs, and every time it needs to run exactly this one way. And if it doesn't run this way, it doesn't run. So you know that every answer kind of coming out of it is solid. Um, where do you bridge that gap? Well, my proposal is on focusing on unmanaged intelligence. You need to manage the intelligence, and we need to move into a place where we're actually calculating the cost per completed workflow. So in the case that you gave, the software vendor or the company providing the lead, they don't get paid for that. They don't get paid for misinformation, right? And so if their current pricing is structured hourly or per seat or per lead, um, I think that they're gonna if they're gonna have these mistakes, they're gonna go out of business long term unless they repair it because people are gonna walk away and say, well, love your service, but there's just it's costing us too much information. It's costing us brand reputation, potential customers loss, sales loss. Um, I think the natural economics of the situation are going to work out where those folks that are focusing on the quality and driving down the cost of delivering a completed high quality lead, those are going to be the winners.
Yes, and you touch on two important things. One is prompted to the point where if you cannot finish the complete analysis, do not do it. And I had another conversation with Adobe champion. He works at Sprout, a social media platform, and he talked about markdown files, that this is a very important new shift in how you structure your workflow process. And what you mentioned in your markdown files, that's what exactly you said. If you cannot do something, do not invent, do not change the process, do not add new words or whatever. So basically have very strong guardrails and rules about how to run the script and finish the process in this AI output. That's first. And probably we'll see more of that in the future. There was just a new law that was released in New York about synthetic performers. I believe California is following it in August. So we see more of this regulation and restriction, and in a good way, where we're trying to control hallucinations, and it's better not to finish the job than finish it with some imaginary results or half of a data set. And the second point that I want to unpack is, indeed, so with this, how would you know, in some cases, to catch the mistake might take a few weeks? For example, a person ran a report and they did not realize that AI analyzed 3/4 of the data set. And it sounds very smart and it sounds intelligent, but then it's off by a few percentage. And let's say that was a market share estimate and they are launching the product assuming this data is right. So when you're mentioning that the company should be paid and the AI agent transaction should be compensated if it's finished without mistakes or errors, there's a chance that at some businesses and in some cases the error might take a while to catch, and the cycle of payment might extend dramatically by a quarter, for example. How would you combat that or solve it?
Yeah. Thinking like a product manager here, I would try to build it into a couple of aspects. Like one would be model-based problem solving. So try to build a model around the workflow, and then around that, understand what are the potential sub problems that can happen in that workflow. Then layer on like a loop. So think about, your customer's experience, and then how do we build a loop that gets you the feedback you need so you can resolve the situation as quickly as possible. And so, one way could be, hey, you get paid as soon as you generate the lead, but there's a failback for the customer to dispute the transaction at a later point in time, where then you have a automatic return or a payment back to the customer for the failure. Or you set another way is, hey, you set up a process where you actually don't get paid until the customer has gone to the location and completed the work is completed. There's obviously trade-offs to your business. You need to figure out which one would be more viable for you. But the key here is to build in that feedback mechanism based on your customer feedback and their business model, because what you want ideally in the product space is to be able to sit down with your customer and understand what it is they're trying to achieve, and get to a point where they bring you in the room, or they bring you into their workflow and show you what they're trying to do. And then it's more of a collaboration at that point, versus like you're delivering a product and service and they're consuming it, and then you're just doing your best to infer and try to figure out what they need, versus they're literally telling you their problems and what they need help on. And I always try to get to that space where you're sitting in the room with them, and you're treated more like a fellow employee or a coworker rather than a supplier. And when you get that to that level, you can just achieve a lot more with your customers.
Yes, I like this ethical approach, and it sounds like it helped you, especially in your previous role, to score some wins at Intel. And there was a big win back of one of a signature customer. Do you want to share a little bit of that story?
Yeah, I love this story. I get asked about this one quite a bit because it was featured internally, and I want to give credit to our sales team because our sales team had maintained these relationships for many years. And so essentially what happened was our organization had reorganized. I was asked to help with the casino gaming segment. And so in this segment, we're dealing with game makers. These are the companies that are building games that go into casinos. And essentially at one point we were our products were in all of these in most of these games. And over the years we had lost some market share, especially with some of the very large ones. And our sales team had maintained those relationships. So despite the fact that we hadn't won, they had maintained those relationships. We had essentially gone back over the last couple of years, revamped our strategy, and spent a lot of time sitting with the customers, going over our roadmap changes, explaining our new technologies. And then, I think the big win for us was communicating that we were still dedicated to the segment and wanted to work with these customers, and they saw that as an important commitment to them, and they felt more reassured, and as a result of that and our improving product roadmap, they decided to come back to Intel, which was amazing.
Nice. And how do you think this philosophy and kind of your visionary thinking will help you in your new role? Because you are in this very hot industry. So, how do you think you can apply those principles in your new role and maybe make a positive change in the US and beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't change my approach. I always want to make sure that the customer knows that I am advocating for them, and most importantly that I'm listening. Just sitting down, trying to understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and then being frank with them when I need some information. I know that in tech there's obviously intellectual property, and that you can't share everything. But there are what I like to say is we don't have to share our technology in order to understand each other's problems. And so if you can tell me what your problems are without getting into the technology too deep, then I can be able to piece solutions together or ideas on how we can work together. And hopefully that gives them the sense that I'm committed, that my company's committed, my team, and then they're more willing to share because everyone. I like to tell other product managers. I really have never experienced a person who does not want to share their problems. Like, people love to talk about their problems, especially when they feel like they can trust you and they feel like you're here trying to help them solve those problems.
Exactly. And what will that ecosystem look like? So, your team and who your customers are going to be moving forward.
Yeah, so our customers here in the space that I'm in now, it's a very different than the Edge group. So in the Edge group, we have this like long list of many customers, a lot of companies, and they're they're much smaller than the ones I'll be dealing with today. So the customers here in this new group are in the data center space. So you can imagine the names, all the big hyperscalers. Those are our largest customers. And what I really like about B2B, especially in these places, is you get to meet with different people. It's not one-on-one. It's like you're meeting with a team, and so you're having to construct your buyer's committee, and the profile of the individuals on that committee, and understanding each of their objectives, because sometimes even within a team at the same customer, they have different objectives, slightly different. Obviously, they're trying to achieve the same goal for their company, but on an individual level, they have their own individual goals. And so at these new customers, that's just going to be a lot less customers, but much bigger buying committees.
And what about US government?
Yeah, the government here is not in my space. That's actually handled by another. That's a whole other area of Intel that is growing. By the way, they've brought in a lot of talent to go and work for these very high profile and special projects, and so they have dedicated teams. So I'm more in the commercial space. Yep.
Nice. Is there anything else, Joel, that you wanted to share with our audience?
I would say that we talked about it a little bit, but my thesis here at the moment is agentic AI. So this idea that computers are talking to computers, programs are running automatically is just going to result in a huge explosion here in the tech space, the largest since the internet came on board in the late 90s. And if you're not familiar with agentic AI, I would spend a little bit of time just trying to understand it because it's definitely here to stay. It's going to keep growing, and it can be very helpful for you. Imagine that in the background you have employees or these agents working for you, and so one podcast, one founder recently said, he's like, imagine, if I went to you today and said, here's 100 employees, what are you going to go do? Think about what your answer to that question might be. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina. Thank you for having me on.